Hello everyone, Xenoblade Hero here today, and today I will be talking about a VGC 16 match I had with one of my rivals, Jamie Boyt, who last time I faced him was at a regional level tournament in a top cut, and we had a best of 3 set there which he ended up winning. So we ended up facing each other again in a friendly tournament that we played amongst UK players, and it was a very entertaining set, and I had to upload it. Now, VGC 16 is very new, and for some, very exciting format, and one of the main things that VGC 16 has over VGC 15 is that you are allowed to bring 2 Ubers or legendaries with you that aren't event Pokemon. They are like the cover Pokemon of the games. I think that describes it pretty well. And there's some very strong picks available now. You are only allowed to bring 2 to a battle. 2 in your team, sorry. And obviously you can bring 2 with you in a battle because you've got 2 with you. And I feel that at the moment people have gone towards Groudon and Xerneas because they are very obviously very powerful, and the Xerneas can set up very easily with the support options that can be provided to it. It's interesting to see how this format has changed the metagame completely, and I'd say it's taken a much more offensive route with the options available, and it requires definitely a different sort of team building to what we had last year in VGC 15. I'd say you need to have some sort of support for these hugely powerful Pokemon that you have to bring, and also you need support to obviously take on any sort of damage, whether that's in the form of pranksters with Focus Sash or whether that's bulky utility like you're going to see in these sets that I had with Jamie Boy. So as you can see from team preview, I had Kyogre, Rayquaza, Togekiss, and Ferrothorn. I decided to bring these 4 to all of my games. The Pokemon that you don't see on the screen is Landorus. That was a choice-banded Landorus that I didn't really see a way to bring it into Boyt's team, which I will describe in a minute. And also I didn't bring my Liepard either, for similar reasons. Boyt's team was Gengar, Kyogre, Rayquaza, Scizor, Thundurus, and Togekiss, which is interesting because we had somewhat similar teams, so in the best of 3, accommodating for that was surely very interesting. And what he decided to lead with in the first set was Gengar and Kyogre, and I decided to lead with Kyogre and Togekiss. Now I will play through this match, and we can see the first part of the match. Why I decided to lead with Kyogre Togekiss is I felt that my set carries Water Spout, and I felt this would be very powerful against a lot of his team. Not a lot of his team resists it other than the Ubers, and Rayquaza should still take a decent amount of damage from a Water Spout. Also, he didn't have any way to one-hit KO my Togekiss, so I figured it was rather safe to lead with it, and depending on the lead matchup, either Tailwind to raise my speed and outspeed everything in his team, which he could only match if he used his own Togekiss, or I could use a Follow Me, and which is what I do here. Now, I decided to use Follow Me because of what I explained. I can Water Spout this side very easily. However, I don't want to KO Gengar, because Gengar actually against my team is not very strong, I don't feel. Well, it can offer some really good utility, like it can taunt my Togekiss, for example, but past that, I don't want him to be able to switch in to, say, for him to be able to sacrifice his Gengar and switch in Rayquaza, because Rayquaza Kyogre would be very tough for me to take down. So to slow his momentum down, I make sure in my mind that keeping the Gengar alive is my top priority, not letting him being able to sacrifice it to gain free momentum. Now, he decides to go for the Taunt and Thunder combination, which is pretty reasonable, and Follow Me also manages to allow me to keep all of my health, so it makes Water Spout a lot more powerful. and should do about half damage to Kyogre, I would have thought. So here we go, with some Water Spout, and it does, yeah, roughly just under half damage to that Kyogre. Now, he decides to go for the Sludge Bomb on my Togekiss. I felt like I was the only thing he could have done to take down my Kyogre in this position was by Sludge Bombing and using Thunder on it. And if he did that, that would have only KO'd if he got a poison on the Sludge Bomb, I believe, or a critical hit. So I decided it was safe to try and set up a Tailwind if I could, to allow my Rayquaza, because I've got that in the back, to come in and threaten the entirety of his team. But he decides to cleverly go for the Sludge Bomb on my Togekiss, even though I don't use Follow Me. And that is enough damage to take it out, because that's a super effective hit. So here I obviously find out that his Kyogre is faster, almost certainly, because I've got a strange speed tier. I don't think he's very defensive. I think he's not a defensive variant because of my speed tier. It's quite slow, and he also took a reasonable amount of damage from the Water Spout, so that suggested that he had a high amount of speed. So we both exchange Thunders, and unfortunately he gets a Paralysis on my Kyogre, which makes it very tough to attack with it after this point, because of the Pokemon that he has in the back. But thankfully I managed to KO with a combination of Thunder and Water Spout. So from here he brings in his own Rayquaza, and I bring in my Rayquaza as well. Because I felt this was a good decision, as when I Mega Evolve I can actually outspeed his Gengar. I don't know at this point if he has Will-O-Wisp or not, so I figured it would be safe to bring it in rather than my other option in the back, the Ferrothorn. And it gives me more momentum, it gives me a more variety of plays. And his Rayquaza, we managed to see that his Airlock activates. And he also Mega Evolves first, so that means because mine's a max speed variant, we're definitely speed tying right now. Which is obviously all of this information that I've learned, like about his Kyogre being faster than mine, my Rayquaza being the same speed tier. It all adds up and all gives us some interesting information. At this point I know that it's possible for my Rayquaza to also be able to KO the Kyogre with Dragon Ascent, which could come in useful in the next set. So here he goes for the Icy Wind, which is interesting. I honestly didn't actually expect the Icy Wind, as my Kyogre was already paralysed, but it makes sense because it hits my Rayquaza, and now it's definitely slower than his, so it makes it risky for me to make some moves. Now I double up on the Rayquaza here, because as I stated earlier, I do not want to KO the Gengar and give him a free switch into something more powerful in the back. So the full paralysis on my Kyogre actually doesn't matter here at all. Now my Kyogre manages to switch out, and I switch into Ferrothorn here because I figure out that he cannot, if Sludge Bomb is his only attacking move, an Icy Wind, then my Kyogre should be able to, my Ferrothorn should be able to survive any attack that Rayquaza throws at it other than Overheat. And overheating the Kyogre would be a very risky play, I would say. So his safest play is to probably target either Rayquaza or Kyogre with a Dragon Ascent or something like that. And from here I decide to probably protect Rayquaza. I would have thought at least, yeah. Protect my Rayquaza because that stops it from being attacked. And now I have two options that can hit Rayquaza without it KOing one of mine. Okay, Rayquaza is a really difficult threat in that it can KO most of the metagame it faces. So from here I decide to switch back into Kyogre. This is both to test if he has the Overheat on his set, which I run on mine, and also it's obviously to protect Ferrothorn, and it's so I don't end up getting my own Rayquaza KO'd if he decided to say attack it. I definitely don't want it being KO'd at this point because it's potentially one of my win conditions at this point. It outspeeds the Gengar and I don't want to risk losing it so easily. So he does go for the Overheat, which means I made a very good prediction. And I go for the Gyro Ball, which surprisingly only does half damage. I thought it would do a bit more than that. Definitely underestimating Rayquaza's bulk there. Now he switches into the Scizor. And from here, yeah, I decide to protect... No, he decides. Oh, sorry, no, the animation made it look like Gengar was protecting then. Yeah, I decide to protect here. And go for the Gyro Ball. Even though he switches into Scizor, any kind of chip damage on Scizor is useful at this point. He goes for the Sludge Bomb, KOs my Kyogre. I believe from here I feel that Leech Seeding the Scizor is the best play, because I still want Gengar to stay in and lose him momentum. I don't want to give him a free switch into Rayquaza, because that would probably end the game. So I feel like Leech Seed has the biggest payoff here. It will do more damage over time. However, he reveals the Sword Stance, which is a very threatening move. As my Rayquaza doesn't have extreme speed, I won't be able to potentially chip the Scizor into extreme speed range, as I don't have the move. So Bullet Punching here means that Bullet Punch and Sludge Bomb should be able to KO my Rayquaza from this range. Might be able to survive one Bullet Punch, maybe, depending on what item the Scizor has. If it's Life Orb, it has a chance to KO, potentially. But Rayquaza is surprisingly bulky. So either way, I switch in here. And really, what I want to do is still continue to keep that Gengar alive. I mean, a play he could do to get around how I'm playing is by protecting the Scizor and trying to possibly sack off the Gengar, or switch the Gengar itself. But from here, he cleverly goes for the double target onto my Ferrothorn, which reveals some information to him about one of my item choices, which is the Lumberry. I honestly had to protect my Rayquaza at this point, because I didn't want to risk it being KO'd. I actually think that he might have switched into Rayquaza at this point. So that explains my Gyro Ball. I don't agree on it looking back, as getting the chip damage on Scizor would have really helped here. But I suppose I had to double protect to try and stall the Scizor out. So from here, he switches in his own Rayquaza and decides to go for the extreme speed. This is an interesting play. I think he does it on the Rayquaza probably. I mean, we were obviously speed tying at this point, so it's understandable that he'll go for that, and he possibly feared an extreme speed from my own Rayquaza. So I do go for an attack onto Scizor with the... No, I go for an attack onto the Rayquaza with my own Rayquaza in case he decided to KO the Ferrothorn with it. But either way, I go for the Gyro Ball on the Rayquaza now, and that KOs it. So from this point, it's an interesting situation. Although he's at +2, I can actually KO him if I manage to stall out 2 turns. Because Rocky Helmet damage... Oh, no, not Rocky Helmet damage. Iron Barb's damage, KOing him lets me win the game, due to the recoil mechanics. So from here, he goes for the Bug Bite, which is the most damaging move he has, and will KO me at this point. So if I manage to protect again, I do win this game. So obviously I go for it, but unfortunately it fails, and his Bug Bite goes through. So that's game 1 to him, which is unfortunate for me, but he played very well throughout this set, and we both figured out some interesting information about each other's teams. For example, we know that our Rayquaza's speed tie, and I know that his Kyogre is faster than mine. So that leads on to game 2 now, which I will record now. And thank you guys for watching, and see you in the next part. Hope you enjoyed that.